we're going to talk about the data evolution and how we get there. So when we're talking about where we are now and where we need to get to, it's important that we have a sense of realism. For many organizations, they may just have a few data managers that work individually like this, surrounded by data on their screens day in, day out, storing data on their own servers for their own purposes. What we would ideally like to get to is that sort of holistic data environment where data flows seamlessly around an organization and is presented to senior managers for making decisions and shaping the way forward for organizations. So for each organization, it's going to be different. Some organizations will need to make those radical changes and invest a lot of time and effort in improving standards and their infrastructure, their culture and their ways of working. Other organizations might just need to make a few key changes to move to this better way of using data. And the better organizations will simply look at some minor improvements about how they tweak the data that goes into their system. And it may be more about human interactions, improving relationships between data managers and policy leads, things like that. If we think about it in the sense of a data evolution, we can comprehend it like the evolution of the human species. We've been learning more and more about ourselves as we've gone through the centuries. And I would argue it's not so dissimilar to the data world. The PDF now is really quite primitive when we think about data. So whenever data is going into PDFs, it's really of no use to many people. What we'd like to do is encourage this movement to better Excel spreadsheets, not even just Excel spreadsheets, CSV files or an open source file that everyone can use and is machine readable and doesn't get as many problems as using Excel. And then if we think about the brave new world, we need to start thinking about linked data, RDF formats, and creating a sort of holistic data infrastructure where everything can somehow be related to everything else to gain insight about our world. And that might sound far-fetched, but it's what the inventor of the World Wide Web used to talk about, a 5-star open data journey that we all need to go on. I would suggest it's not even just the open data journey. All data we need to be thinking of improving so that it can be better used in more clever ways with better technology. And that may sound a bit far-fetched, but things are already happening. There's the concept of the semantic web, and we already see organizations like the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government collecting data for the semantic web in linked data structures. We also see the Government Digital Service beginning to create the components of linked data, so simple registers of data about how you should refer to everything that you're collecting data about, from local government names to things like the categorizations of local government services, so that we're all categorizing them in the same way. And we're beginning to see that come through within the Scottish Government. Scottish Government have the statistics.gov.scot platform, and that is collecting a lot of statistical data in linked data structures so that it can be better used across the internet. And then we're also looking at people trying to model the associations between organizations and the services that they carry out, the policies that they develop, and the data that underpins all of those things. So we are gradually moving to that evolving place, better world for data. But do we need to rethink our organizational culture? When people come up with these clever plans about moving to a better world, there's often a lot of circumspection, maybe, a lot of fear, perhaps, that we might invest a lot of time and effort in something that doesn't work. But actually, when you look at what are the causes, the blocks to success around data, they're normally human problems. It's not about the technology necessarily. This was a study from Gartner which looked at the key problems, and they're all cultural challenges. They're all sorts of problems of data literacy, people just not understanding why data is important, and lack of resourcing and funding. I would argue what we really need to do is give those people within our organizations, those data experts, a little bit of freedom and allow them to try things, allow them to fail. If that happens, you just get back on the bike and try something else, try things in different ways. But until we allow people that freedom to actually think outside the box, it's very unlikely that we're going to improve as organizations. And once we do start creating data better with better technology, it enables us to move away from thinking what has happened in the past and what does data say about the past. And it brings us more into the present and not allowing us to just look at data within our own departments, but actually looking at how data is used within the community every day and getting more real-time data coming through to make quicker and more informed decisions. And then looking into the future, when we're collecting data better, it enables us to predict what might happen in the future and how we intervene and how we prevent certain circumstances occurring through better data analytics.
So I'm now going to go on and cover a few case studies of examples of where some of the things I've been talking about have been put into practice. So the first thing we talk about is just local government COVID-19 response. So data has been collected from all local authorities in response to the COVID-19 challenges and the services that are being delivered to respond to that. These cover a wide range of topics from the number of business grants, the value of business grants, people who are shielding and have been in contact with local authorities, child protection, homelessness, a real wide range of topics. And it's really useful because it's allowed comparison, it's allowed some benchmarking and understanding the different impacts of different local authorities and the different levels of service, but also to understand the overall impact of the response. And these statistics show just the massive amount of support that local authorities have provided to people during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I should say as well that these really are used to kind of supplement local knowledge. So they have an important role as together with what is important locally. Okay, the next example is from the local government benchmarking framework. So this is an example of useful benchmarking, of course, and it's designed to use data to create questions about service delivery. I think the point to make here is these don't have to be complex analytical pieces. It's just about identifying where variation occurs and understanding what can be done differently to improve performance. So a couple of examples of this. In Falkirk, they had identified below average satisfaction with parks and relatively low expenditure in that area. They highlighted the need to invest to improve that, and their satisfaction is now significantly above average. Similarly, in Renfrewshire, they put together an employability programme. So in 2012, again, Renfrewshire, from the LGBF statistics, recognised that they had very high levels of youth unemployment and a below average number of people helped into work by the council. And they put together a new programme focusing on employability, and that's led Renfrewshire to now completely turn around its performance and to have the highest rate of employment in Scotland and far above the average. So that just demonstrates the scale of improvement there. We can also, as I said earlier on, think about what demand might look like in the future. So this is a piece of work we have done in the improvement service, projecting demand on local government services. This is quite simple, again, methodology based on the relationship between expenditure on different service areas and demographic change. So we know that population is expected to grow, but we know in particular that elderly populations are expected to grow in the future. And that's going to lead to a huge increase in the demand on particularly social care, but a range of services that local government provides. And the reality will be to keep up with that demand for these services, that funding is going to have to increase massively in the next few years, or transformational change will have to be made to help reduce that level of demand or to meet it more effectively. This example is a collaboration across the public sector. So in Bristol City Council, they put together this Think Family database as part of the response to the Troubled Families programme. What it does is they pull together data from 30 public sector sources, so from the council itself, from the Department of Work and Pensions, National Health Service, Department for Education, and that includes things like such as information on parents and children who are involved in crime, attendance at school, and health information. And by matching up all these data sources, they've been able to identify people and families at risk and intervene early enough to support them in tackling the root causes of these issues before they can turn into crisis. And the success of that programme means that there's a number of similar programmes in a number of English councils now. It just really shows the power of drawing together several data sources from across the public sector and taking action to prevent issues further down the line. Another couple of examples, so in Camden Borough Council in London, they have their Camden Resident Index. Again, it's about matching up multiple data sets, and this is done automatically. And they've used that to identify where fraud might be taking place. So for example, where a single person is claiming, multiple people are claiming a single person council tax discount, and they've saved over £800,000 in savings from illegal subletting of council houses. So another example is in Newcastle City Council, where they've used data to identify children most at risk of ending up not in education, employment or training. And to do this, they've identified the kind of key drivers and relationships between young people who end up out of education, employment and training beyond simply looking at exam results. So that includes preschool meal eligibility and truancy and offending records. And by doing that, they've also identified the factors that can help overcome those negative inputs, particularly getting good GCSE results that will help them to hopefully get better outcomes in the future. Thank you for listening. I hope this video has been useful in understanding not just why data is important, but how we can use it to drive decision making and really improve outcomes for some of those vulnerable people in Scotland.